So I'm delighted to be here, and I'm also mindful, my word for this is the holiday frenzy. So I'm mindful that we're doing two things at once. We have bifocals. We're doing Advent, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, but we're immersed in a culture of the holiday frenzy. And I want to tell you that I've given up being Amish, so I'm not going to fight the holiday frenzy. But what I'm going to do is talk about how we can observe a holy Advent so that we might experience what we're longing for, which is the rebirth of the Savior. So, there probably is not a better way to get to Advent than to focus on Him. So, I want you to be real impressed with my technology. So, we're supposed to say, Bishop, we're really impressed. So, O Come, Emmanuel is our Advent song. It's a thing that locates us in that, so that's what we're going to begin with it. You can listen, you can sing, you can mime, you can do whatever you want. Oh, wait a minute, I got to start at the beginning of it. Well, I turned the sound off. Sorry. tell you, there's not much text on here, I just have pictures, so we're not going to miss very much. When we think about waiting, we think we already know the outcome. So we are always impatient because we know what's going to happen and we feel like we're wasting our time in this middle section. I had to go to the doctor on Monday and I found myself saying, this is wasting my time waiting for the doctor. I could be doing all these other things. So we need to know that Advent, this holy waiting that we're practicing in this holy season, is a totally different thing. And the wonderful thing about this hymn, there are a couple things I want to say about it, but the wonderful things about this hymn is it puts together that pleading, that yearning, that cry from the heart. Oh, come. Oh, come, dear Lord, because we do not know how to get to you. Oh, come because our lives won't work without you. Oh, come because our world won't work without you. Oh, come because we do not know how to get out of the fix we're in, whatever that is. It's a cry from the heart. And yet, what happens in this hymn, which is what happens in Advent, is that even in the midst of that cry from the heart to come, we rejoice. We're not sitting in the doctor's office thinking of hateful things about the nurse that won't let us get back there so that we can get on with our important lives. Instead, we're learning to rejoice in the waiting. We're learning to rejoice in the waiting. And that, my friends, is, I believe, one of the gifts that we as a church need to cultivate, and even more important, we as a church need to give away. Because in active waiting, number one, you recognize that you cannot make your life work. It's the gift of teenagers and mosquitoes. You can't make your life work. You can't make the world behave. You can't make the future come any faster than it's coming. And so what happens is you begin to surrender. You begin to stop thinking about what you can do and begin to think about what God has promised to do. And it's in that gap, that we really begin to grow in our faith. And I'm so your side, I can't see my notes, so that's a good thing. I think this is one of the gifts of where we are actually right now as a church. I think that we know that the church of the 1950s is gone. We do not know what the church of the 21st century is going to be. And it's a time where we're called to practice a long, holy waiting, which is not just whatever you want to do, God's okay with me, show up whenever you want to. But it's also not, God, we don't think that you're really following your job description, so we're going to go ahead and do your job for you. It's neither one of those. Instead, it's watching and waiting and participating in what is being born. That's this active waiting. And I believe that's also what we're trying to do as a church. And I want to say that that is very hard for us. Because we have all these gadgets. And I've got one over here too. We have all these gadgets that give us the illusion that we can control things. Give us the illusion of instant gratification. Give us illusion that the way the world works is a stimulus and a predictable response. If I punch this button, this will happen on my screen. And therefore, I'm in control of my life. And if I'm not in control, I should just get another app, and then I will be. Right? And Advent is where you finally run out of the illusion that you can make your life work. Advent is where you run out of the illusion that if you just had more, your life would be better. If you just had more, your life would be better. Why else would God design the universe so that Mary and Joseph have to leave and walk for God knows how long in the dark to find their way? Why else? So, we need to get away from this kind of waiting. We need to get away from that's pretty good. The fix for wait is to give one's complete and undivided attention to the present moment. Parker Palmer tells a story about when he was in Outward Bound, the Quaker writer. When he was Outward Bound, they were doing this, climbing up this mountain, this rock face, and he got stuck so that he couldn't go down and he couldn't go up. And the head of Outward Bound was up above him, and so he sort of yelled up and said, "Now what do I do?" And the guy up there yelled down, he said, "Parker, you're about to learn the Outward Bound motto. When you can't get out of it, get into it. When you can't get out of where you are, you need to get into where you are." The answer for us is not by adding more stuff. The answer for us is by going deeper in our faith and our whole dependence on Jesus Christ. In our baptism, I'll never have this opportunity, but it'd be interesting to rewrite our baptismal promises so that we really get it, that what we renounce is the illusion that we can control our life. What we renounce is the illusion that somehow who we are is dependent upon what we own, what we do, or what people say about us. Instead, when we turn around in baptism, what we say is, do you put your whole faith and trust in Jesus Christ? Yes or no? Do you promise to follow and obey Him as your Lord? Yes or no? And if you do, it means you are going to learn to walk in the dark. If you do, it's like a 100% guarantee that as His disciples, you will come to places where you do not know the way. And you're convinced you are not the right person. And you're convinced that if God would just let you have more stuff, you'd be able to do it. God always says, you can't get out of it, you just need to get in. You just need to take the first step. The way that this happened for me was actually when my wife and I were, I have to do the math here, 29. We got married when we were 21 years old. We got married the day we graduated from Carolina. We didn't go to our college graduation, went to our wedding. And we discovered that we couldn't have children. And it's the first time that my life didn't work. I always assumed if you studied hard, if you worked hard, if you didn't go to jail, if you were a nice person, if you knew your manners, blah, 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 if you wore button-down shirts, the whole thing, that your life would work. And that really happened for 29 years. Well, my life pretty much worked. And then all of a sudden my life didn't work. And I honestly could not figure out what rule had I broken. What could I go back and do over to make my life work? And that's where I discovered that when you can't get out of it, you have to get into it. And it's the first time in my life that I really said the prayer that we always say when we're honest, which is please. That's where all our prayers begin. Please. It's either please or thank you. Please. And so my wife and I, we were living in Atlanta at the time, and we filed for adoption with Atlanta Social Services. Long story. And after about 3 years, we totally forgot about it. And after 3 years, we were like, we know that Santa's supposed to come, but he ain't showing up. So, or any of his little baby elves either. So, and about 5 years after we had signed up, we got this phone call on a Sunday night, 6 o'clock at night. It had a different name back then we're not going to go into. So I picked up the phone and they said, whatever my name was, they said, you can come tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock and pick up your son. Joe and I got in the car and we went to J.C. Penney, and I said to the saleswoman, this is your lucky day, we need everything. Next day, we went in and they brought in this little baby boy, 14 days old. And we had brought pajamas that were 4 sizes too big for him. And we got ready to leave, and they said, you have to name him. What's his name? I said, how would I know? And they said, well, you can't leave if you have a name. And it's again when I learned the upward bound motto is that you can't get out of it, you got into it. So I sort of stared at him and I said to Joe, what's his name? And I said, I think his name's Arthur. So we named him Arthur. And as soon as I got home, I called my mother and she said, we don't have any Arthurs in our family. I said, well, we do now. She called me back 24 hours later and she said, it's okay, I found our family tree. There is an Arthur. I'm convinced that that my journey of faith took a quantum leap in that story. A quantum leap. Because it was the first time that I really got, maybe it's about grace. Maybe it's about just going up to the altar rail with your open hand saying, I don't know what's going to happen, but I hope I'm going to get God's grace. And suddenly you get the bread of heaven. And suddenly you get the cup of salvation. And no one up there says, you deserve this. These are the gifts of God for the people of God. So in Advent, what happens is we let go of all of our stuff. We let go of our resume, we let go of our good deeds, we let go of our illusions that we deserve anything. And we say, whatever. Whatever you want to bring is what I want. Because in the end, you're God and I'm not. This is just a totally counterintuitive thing for us as Americans. And it's a particular counterintuitive thing for us living in 2013. Because it's instant gratification and it's this illusion we're in control all the time. And if you're not in control, you just need a better gadget. So, I thought one of the ways to help us get here, I don't know if y'all can see this. Let me raise this up a little bit. Are you in the back? Can y'all see anything? I'm thinking that means no. Those lines will go away. Let's see if that's better. Is that better? Better? This is a painting by Botticelli. I used to know when he lived, but 1500s or so, give or take 100 years. And it's been hanging in our bedroom for maybe 15 years. We We actually have about 3 annunciations in our bedroom. But I've been staring at it this Advent season. And I have part of it is, there are a lot of reasons I like this, but part of this is there's a poem to go with it. And some of y'all that know me know that I'm going to give you some poems, whether you want them or not. So it's part of my Christmas present to you. So I think we numbered these. I think this is the back page, number 6. Right? Andrew Hudgens is a British poet, and this is the name of the poem. The name of the page was gold. It says Stello Annunciation. This will get us into this. The angel has already said, "Be not afraid." He said, "The power of the Most High will darken you." Her eyes are downcast and half closed. There's a long pause, a pause here of forever, as the angel crowds her. She backs away, her left side pressed against the picture frame. He kneels. He's come in all unearthly innocence to tell her of glory, not knowing, not remembering how terrible it is. And Botticelli gives her eternity to turn. Look out the doorway, where on a hill floats a castle, and halfway across the river towards it juts a bridge not yet completed. And neither is the touch, angel to virgin, both her hands held up, both elegant, one raised as if to say, "Stop," while the other hand, the right one, reaches towards his. And as it does, it parts her blue robe and reveals the concealed red of her inner garment to the red tiles of the floor and the red folds of the angel's robe. But while her whole body pulls away, only her head, already haloed, bows, acquiescing. And though she will, she's not yet said, "Behold, I am the handmaiden of the Lord." As Botticelli, in his great pity, lets her refuse, accept, refuse, and think again. So when you look at this, let's see if I can do the focus a little better. That's not the focus. Probably as good as you're going to get. As you look at this, why do you think the painter put this window in here, and why the tree or the river? Tree of life. Tree of life. And where else does trees appear in the Bible? Yeah, it's if you know the Bible has the bookends of the tree of life. The tree of life occurs in Genesis and also occurs in Revelation, and then occurs in the middle at the crucifixion. So it reminds us that what is ahead of her is not just new life. It is new life. It's also a death. If you remember the Song of Simeon, Mary brings her baby in, and the song begins with, "He'll do great things, it's the King of David, na 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 na," and then just right at the very end it says, "Oh, and by the way, He'll put a sword in your heart too." It's always life and death. It's always Christ has died, Christ has risen. And then we end with the other tree of life, Christ will come again. So one of the many points of this is that every time we're in holy waiting, the world is about to turn. Every time we're in this holy waiting, it's not just holding our breath so we can get through it. It's not like you're in one of those lines of the toll booth where you're just waiting to put your ticket in there so you can get on with your busy life, your predictable life. It's suddenly you're in the hands of the living God, and you have no idea what's going to happen. But you know that part of it will be a death to some of you and a resurrection to parts of you that you had forgotten, or maybe never even had, or maybe never even had. I'm convinced that if I had thought about, will I get a call for a baby every day for 5 years, I would never got a call. It's when we let go of waiting and open up to hoping that the world changes.
You can put your problems in the foot of the cross.
Absolutely.
Jesus takes care of the rest.
Absolutely. Knowing that in His taking care of the rest, part of us will have to die and be raised.
Exactly.
Part of us has to die and be raised. There's a reason that Mary and Joseph have to make that walk, and it's because this journey of birth, as those of you who are women, some of you know this, is not easy. Anyone want to say amen to that? It's not easy. It's messy. And you think you're going to die. And you're not the same. You're not the same. And you don't just get back to square one. You never get back to square one. So what I want to say about that is that part of us, as we open up to this Advent, we need to know what it is we're opening up to. And I'll talk about that in just a second. I want to share with you one other painting that I don't know how I found this or why, but here it is. This is by a Korean painter whose name looks like He Kai. I don't know what his name really is. You can see it on the wall. And this, of course, is Mary and Elizabeth. Obviously very different. Here's Mary, here's Elizabeth. Of course, in this painting, Elizabeth's not as old as we might picture her. Well, what do you notice about these two? What do you notice about this painting itself? Where is this? Where's the scene first?
Outside, one of the houses in Bethlehem.
Yeah. So it's not in this faraway place. It's actually on the street. So it's in the middle. It's in the midst of life. It's while you're on your way to something else, something happens. What do you notice about Elizabeth?
She's working.
She's working. That's right. So she's on her way to something else. And how is she to Mary?
She's showing love.
She's showing her love. She's holding out her hand and she's totally focused on it. She's absolutely focused. Often the way that we discover the good news about ourselves is when we focus on someone else. It's why when we share the peace, we don't go, the peace of the Lord be always with me. And also with me. All good things that happen in the church happen between us. This is a total digression, but it's why we move the whole geography of the altar so that it's not the priest interceding for you. It's gathering around the table together. It's discovering the presence of the Lord in between. So the way that I'm going to see Jesus is in you, and the way you're going to see Jesus is in me, and that's the way it is. And you notice that Mary is remembering what's being born. She's holding her child already, but she's also leaning towards Elizabeth. leaning towards her companion on the way. There's a story the monks tell of a young monk who was very rigorous in his discipline. And one of the older monks came up to the abbot and said, Brother Porter is trying to lift himself up into heaven. And the abbot said, well, go grab his feet and yank him down. Because you can't get there by yourself. So you can't, all this good news is always shared. Always shared. So I want to talk a little bit about hope. I can't remember these slides, so here we are. So my father owned he was the president of a sweater factory in Asheville. Any of you who are over 60 may have had a Hadley sweater. Anyone have a Hadley sweater? One. So my father was vice president of Hadley Sweaters. They were in Weaverville, and they made cashmere sweaters. So there was about 100% chance I was going to get a cashmere sweater for Christmas. So every Thanksgiving we make out our list. When we ate all this turkey, and we go waddle into the living room and clock down, and we make our Christmas list. So at about 6, I learned to be very sort of strategic about this. So I'd always put as the first thing, cashmere sweater. Figuring if you put the right answer, then maybe you get to the... So, and then I worked sort of down, and near the bottom of the list, I'd put in things like giraffe. One year I said I'd like a full baseball stadium in the backyard. Because I figured, what's the point of Christmas if all you're going to get is a sweater, right? I think that part of what happens to us, because when we get out of Advent and into the holiday frenzy, is we're thinking about our list. And when we think about Christmas, we're thinking about a proper expectant, reasonable exchange. I give you a book, you give me a box of chocolate or whatever. I mean, it's, we're sort of figuring out how's this going. We don't want to be embarrassed, so if someone gives you, a new iPad, you don't want to give them,
Sweater.
a sweater. That hurt. So I think we as Christians, what we need to do, at least my plan is, I'm all about presents. If y'all want to give me one, I'll give you my address. I'm all about presents. But what we want to do is say, this is what we're going to do for the holiday frenzy. So the tree, the stockings, the whole deal is fine. Santa Claus is back in time, fine. But what we want to do is remember that this is about wishing. Now, any of y'all remember Dusty Springfield, Wishing You Luck?
Great.
So there's wishing, which is about what is reasonable and can be expected. Right? I asked Joe for the Michael Connelly book. So I'm wishing for the new Michael Connelly novel. So Harry Bosch's, they need it like that. But hoping is when we stop thinking about what we can buy and we think about what God has promised. And what I want to say to you is that the gift that we can give the world is the gift of hope. I preach this all the time, so you probably have heard it. I think the primary sin of America is not anything to do with sex, anything to do with money, anything to do with gambling, anything like that. The number one sin of America is despair. Because we have forgotten how to hope. Because our horizon is limited to what we can do by ourselves. And so what we're called to do as Christians, This is why we hear Isaiah through Advent. What we're called to do as Christians is to ask ourselves, what is God's dream for this world? And can we bear to hope for it? Can we bear to believe in it? Can we bear to actually commit ourselves to be instruments that God might use to bring it about? Can we bear to do that? Can we bear to do that? It's not the Christmas tree we're waiting for. It's the Savior. And I think about this so much because I think, Thoreau talked about us practicing lives of quiet desperation. I think that's where we are. I was reading the New York Times the other day about South America, Central America, and Mexico. And there's just this line that goes straight through there where the drugs come in. It's the cocaine route. And you can just see those cities have just given up. They've just given up. And so murder is no longer an exceptional act of that whole road. And we as a world read about it and we just think, well, isn't that too bad? Isn't that too bad? I read an article a couple of months ago about the fact that the number one problem in Africa is clean water. And here we are in the 21st century and we can't get people to have clean water. In India, they cannot control malaria. 21st century. And we think about places like the Sudan, and we think, well, there'll just never be peace there. There just never will be. That's just the way it is. And so when we hear these wonderful things in Isaiah, what it calls us to say is, we know we don't know what to do about it, but if God is God, this is not the way God intends God's children to live, and therefore do we dare to hope, to believe that this is why the Savior has come? Yes or no? Do you put your whole trust in Jesus Christ? Yes or no? Yes or no?
You do, but you have to have faith that He's going to hear you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
With hope comes faith.
Absolutely. Faith, hope, and love. So what I would say to you is we have, what is it? 10 days for Christmas? No, that's not true.
7 days.
You think I should start shopping? Nah. This is why we sing this song. These are called the O antiphons, the pleas to God. And you can see on your little sheet that they start on December 17th. So there's one for every day. And these are prayers to God about how to hope. How to hope. And there's one that I want to hold up for you. Since I can't read, so... Here it is. Look at number 7, December 22, and just think about our country. O come, desire of nations. Is this what our nation desires? O come, desire of nations. Bind in one the hearts of all humankind. Bid our sad divisions cease, and be thyself our King of Peace. That's a song of hope. That's a song of hope. And so the question I would have for you is, when we believe that, when we sing that with all our heart, then how can we move towards that? Because let's just remember that Mary and Joseph are not just sitting there in Nazareth saying, okay, here we are. They are actually walking towards the birth of the Savior. That's that active waiting. They're participating in what God is doing. So we are called to have the vision and then to walk towards it. Jim Wallace of Sojourner says that hope is believing in the promise despite the evidence, and then watching the evidence change. Believing in the promise despite the evidence, and then watching the evidence change. That's what we're called to do. Okay, I'm going to read one more point, and then I'll let you talk, and then we're all going to go shopping. Well, actually, two of us are not going shopping, right? Marie House, page 2. I got all these great points. You can put these in your stockings, you know. Look what Santa brought you for Christmas. Woo! Points. Actually, I think we have one more. Marie Howe, Annunciation. Even if I don't see it again, or ever feel it, I know it is. And that if once it hailed me, it ever does. And so it is myself I want to turn in that direction. I think of that as, that's that Advent thing of turning towards hope, turning towards birth, turning towards Bethlehem. And so it is myself I want to turn in that direction, not as towards a place, but it was a tilting within myself, as one turns a mirror to flash the light to where it isn't. I was blinded like that and swam in what shone at me, only able to endure it by being no one. None of us is more special than anyone else. By being no one, and so specifically myself, I thought I'd die for being loved like that. Must be true. All right, let me see any of your responses. I've learned that my son asked me the other day, well, the other month, so Dad, why do you put your watch on the pulpit? Is it because once you start talking, you don't know how to stop? Yeah, pretty much. But I've got to watch, so.